Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Speaker series, our virtual series highlighting Haas undergraduate alumni with a focus on women in leadership. My name is Katie Marshall. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions with a focus on yield and transition, and my pronouns are she, hers. We will begin our event this evening with a land acknowledgement. The Haas School of Business recognizes that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of Huichin, the original landscape of the Chicano-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This region continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley Haas community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the land acknowledgement, and thank you for joining us this evening. We are joined this evening by our recently admitted students. Want to give out a shout out and a welcome to our new students to Berkeley Haas. And we're also joined by current students and Haas staff and many members of our community. So we are excited to bring you all in this evening as recent admits to welcome you to our active community and conversations that we have here at Haas. Tonight is our second session in our virtual speaker series. And I would like to take a moment to thank Berkeley Women in Business, which is a Haas student organization who has partnered with us to facilitate these conversations with our featured alumni. Cindy Zoe, president of Berkeley Women in Business, will be leading us in our discussion this evening. Cindy is a junior at UC Berkeley studying business administration and operations research with minors in data science and sustainability. On campus, she serves as the president of Berkeley Women in Business, which she has been involved with for the past 3 years, cultivating relationship development and community amongst women on our campus. She's also a project leader with the Berkeley Group, a social sector consulting organization dedicated to driving strategic change for nonprofits in alignment with her strong passion for the intersection of business and social impact. Cindy holds experience in the venture capital and broader investing space, having interned at firms such as Davidson Kempner, and will be working in the private credit space this upcoming summer. As a Girls Who Invest scholar, Cindy is especially passionate about supporting women pursuing careers in traditionally male-dominated industries like finance and investing. She hopes to enter the finance field herself, which makes her particularly excited to be moderating today's Speaker series, Women in Leadership Conversation with Marina. And so, Cindy, I'll hand the mic over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Katie. And to introduce Marina, Marina Gracias is General Counsel, Corporate Secretary of Varo Money Incorporated, the first all-digital national bank in the United States. At Varo, she also leads the public policy and social impact and DEI initiatives and contract enforcing. Marina's strategic leadership was pivotal in Varo obtaining the first digital-only OCC National Bank Charter and guiding the organization through product launches and enterprise-wide business initiatives. As a key advisor to the C-suite and the board, Marina has led the organization through significant milestones. Before joining Varo, Marina was the managing director at Accenture and also held various roles both on the business side and legal side at Visa, Providian, and national law firms, including Chief Procurement Officer and Senior Vice President and Associate General Counsel. She has worked extensively on global projects, including M&A work in the UK and Argentina, outsourcing globally and bringing credit cards to Myanmar and debit processing to Japan. Marina received her JD from University of California, Berkeley, and her MBA and bachelor's from the Haas School of Business, University of California, Berkeley. Marina serves on the boards of UC Berkeley Haas School of Business and Junior Achievement Northern America. And with that, we'll jump right into the questions. First one being, What motivated you to attend UC Berkeley, Marina?
Thank you. I chose Berkeley for a couple of reasons. One is the ranking of the school. It's impressive, and um, that was important to me. I think the diverse curriculum was important because, an undergraduate degree in business at Berkeley allows you to not only take business courses, but you're required to take a breadth of other courses, whether it be history and, the sciences and things like that. So you come out with a very broad background including business. And I think that really helps prepare you for business. So when I looked at other, schools, degrees, some of them were very business oriented, which was important, but didn't give you the breadth of the curriculum. The faculty at Berkeley was impressive too, and I think that was also important. And I think being at Berkeley, the environment of being in the Bay Area was also important to me. Now, while I was already in the Bay Area, I did look at schools in other parts of the country, but being at Berkeley is so important because you have the opportunity to work with so many cutting edge companies that are sort of at your doorstep. But you also have a lot of traditional companies. So being at Berkeley sort of gives you the opportunity to work at a variety of different companies. I think the other thing that's important about Berkeley is the fact that having a degree from Berkeley is so valued by so many companies that your job opportunities once you graduate are more vast than if you go to other schools.
Yes, I totally resonate with that. And another question is, what did Haas teach you about leadership? Were there any classes, professors, or projects at Haas that had a lasting impact on your leadership style or worldview?
Yeah, I think so. So what's interesting, because I went both undergrad and I came back for an MBA, but there was a large gap in my years between my undergrad and my MBA. And I will say, when I was originally at Haas, it was a more traditional program, probably had more, at that time, there were more narrow opportunities or more narrow fields that business included. And I think if I now look at the curriculum, both when I was an MBA and now, you have the ability to learn about so many different fields. Even when Katie was talking about all the things that you're involved in, and those opportunities that are now at Haas, I think gives you the ability to learn about so many more subjects that I think then allows you to actually participate in more leadership opportunities in those different areas because you're coming out with experience, whether it be on sustainability, whether it be in finance. I mean, you have so many of those opportunities that I think that gives you that opportunity to kind of work more and take on more leadership roles. I think the Haas also now has more clubs and more groups that do different things that gives people also more opportunities to demonstrate leadership at early on in their careers, and even while they're in school they have these leadership opportunities, which I think helps develop the skills you need.
Very much. I really agree with that. I think Haas takes a very entrepreneurial approach when it comes to cultivating leadership across its students. And on top of that, I wanted to ask, you're a rare triple bear. I don't know if any of us have used that term because it's so unique, having both your Bachelor's of Science, JD, and MBA all from Berkeley. How did each of these experiences shape your worldview, and in what ways did Haas uniquely prepare you for roles across legal, procurement, and fintech sectors?
Yeah, so I'll take the so when I think, we talked a little about why I came to Berkeley. So for my undergraduate degree, if I even look at just because I did go through the interview process before I decided I was going to go into law school, but if I look at my curriculum and what I studied at Haas allowed me to interview for a diverse set of jobs when I was graduating. And so it gave me the skill set. So I interviewed and got offers to join a traditional, one of the big four. and I could have gone traditional accounting and auditing, consulting. But I also had a chance to join at that time an offer I got to join GE's. At that time, what they had was a management training program that allowed you to join GE and then sort of do a rotation on a 2-year period across all of the then GE entities. And so that was so important because having that training gave me those opportunities and, provided me with that. And, if I joined GE at that time, it was like you'd get a chance to see a global company and work with them across the globe. I ended up not taking any of those opportunities and decided to go through with my JD. Law school for me was a fantastic experience, but I think also having a business undergrad degree helped me also prepare for law school because it helped me decide that really what I wanted to do was corporate law. And so when I graduated, that's what I could easily do. And it helped me because not only could I be a lawyer, but I could understand the business issues. And I think that also then helped me when I got an opportunity, which surprised me. I was a lawyer and I'd been a lawyer at the company for many years. And the vice chairman called me up one day and said, come work for me. Come on the business side and work for me. I'll create a group for you. And it was a group that would then do all the contracts for the company, but would do global outsourcing strategy, financial analytics, and some of the overall corporate events. And I think if I did not have an undergrad degree in business, all of a sudden leaving the law and going to work on the business side would have been a little more daunting. But I felt I had the foundation to make that switch over. I think when I came back from my MBA at Berkeley, and I chose Berkeley in particular, if I had not gotten into the Berkeley MBA program, I probably would not have come back from my MBA because I was a practicing lawyer and I loved it. But I wanted to learn more. And the business world changes so fast that the ability to come back, and I did the night program. And now it's called a night weekend program, but it was a night program at that point. But by Berkeley having that program, it allowed me to come back and sort of continue my education. And if you really think one of the defining principles at Berkeley about being a student always is really true. I think when you go through Berkeley, you just learn how much is changing and the world changes, and you want to come back and continue to learn. And I think that's really what helped me with the MBA program, was to sort of like update all my skill sets and continue to learn what the world was doing.
I think that's very beautiful. And I like the way that you tied in one of those defining leadership principles. And I think it's not already evident in the different degrees you pursued, but also in the program you were talking about for GE, just taking on that training and more educational type of standpoint into your career. I think that's very unique. And then another question I have for you, might be a little more fun, is what surprised you most about your Haas journey? Was there something that you didn't expect to gain, but now value deeply?
I actually think, I don't think in a way many people realize this until much later in life, in the sense of that the connections you make in college or through your programs can have such an impact in your life. And so, and I remember my first day at law school, actually, they tell you, you look to your left and you look to your right. And these will be people who will be so influential in your life going forward, because you will go through changes, and the network that you build is, I think, so important. And I think you don't necessarily realize how important the other people at Haas will be to your journey until many years from now. And you realize not only the impact people may have had when you were in school, but the connections and the network that you will build from a school like Haas is important. And so those people will impact your journey.
I definitely agree. I think the alumni have been instrumental in terms of our growth. So I totally agree. Second that. And on that note, could you share examples of how Haas has opened doors for you, whether through career changes, promotions, or entrepreneurial opportunities?
Yeah. So I think one of the things, so for example, when I was leaving the law firm and I wanted to move in-house, I actually applied for a job that required not only a law degree, but they wanted an MBA. And at that time, I didn't have an MBA. But I met with the general counsel and I explained to him how I had a business degree and it was from Haas and kind of all the things I had learned as an undergrad. And he hired me, even though I didn't have the MBA that he wanted. But he felt that the Haas, undergrad degree was a strong enough degree that you would be able to, I could take the job. And I will say, number one, there are not many undergrad business degrees at most of the top schools. And so the ability of Haas to have an undergrad degree really helps people, because if you're not sure if you're going to go on and later on get an MBA, or if you want to use it as a foundation because you're going to go on and get a grad degree in something else, that's one of the important things about having a Haas undergrad degree. So as I said, that kind of helped me. I think the other thing that having a business degree has really helped me, I had worked at all very traditional big companies, whether it be at Visa and Accenture. And when I wanted to make a change, I had an opportunity actually to come to a startup. So Varo is a startup. Bank is a startup. And when I came, I left a partnership at Accenture and we had 300,000 plus people. And I took a leap and I came to a startup where I was employee number 8. But it was sort of what I had learned kind of from Haas, and I have stayed very actively involved in the school after graduation. So I've spent a lot more time learning about like the entrepreneurial hub, and a lot of it, and the MBA program also teaches you much more about entrepreneurship, that I was willing to take a leap and join a startup, and where we built the product and put it into market, and have now successfully launched the bank and everything. And I don't think I would have done that had I not been at Haas and learned so much about entrepreneurship. And now what I think is so different from when I went, but it's a great opportunity that now both the undergrads and the MBAs have, is things like the entrepreneurship hub, and to work with other joint degree programs and learn so much about building companies and bringing products to market.
Yeah, definitely. I think Haas has one of the strongest ecosystems in terms of startups, and also just accelerators like Berkeley Sky that make it so strong. So a lot of change makers here ready to build out new things and put it out into the world. And
yeah,
then,
like Cindy, I'm sure there's a statistic, and I apologize because I can't remember who gathered the information, but there are more startups that have come from Berkeley than from even Stanford or
I think you're
any
number
other
one,
school.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so impressive, yes. And then I guess on that note, a defining leadership principle here that we have is also questioning the status quo. I know you mentioned your leadership roles in more traditional companies like Visa and Accenture. What were moments that you had to kind of challenge these systems and push for transformation in large organizations like these?
Yeah. One of the things about, so you mentioned two of the big projects I've worked on Visa was sort of bringing credit cards to Myanmar and debit card processing to Japan. But those are kind of where people say, like, why haven't those countries ever had those? And, and debit card processing to Japan, we did that project in like 2015. So, I mean, it's late in time frame from how long like the US has had debit cards and everything for a developed country like Japan not to have it. And I think sort of the question of the status quo helps you to work on big projects like that. Like you're thinking, like, why hasn't this been done before? Why can't we do it? I think having that motto of question the status quo also is huge when you work in, like for me right now in the startup world. Like you look at why things have been traditionally done one way. Like, why can't you do it another way? And I think once you start working with that kind of mindset, it actually helps you make breakthroughs because you don't always assume, well, that's the way we've always done it. And that has become also very important for me, because as we look at bringing new banking services like to our customers, you could say, well, the banks have always done it this way. But now you can have a chance to say, but why? Why can't we do it a different way?
Then just as a follow-up to that, did you find it easier to kind of make these changes when you took on that startup path rather than your previous roles? And is that what spurred that pivot to the entrepreneurship space?
No, I think I've always had that. I think, and it's funny. So after I graduated, as I mentioned, I stayed active in the school and I was on the Haas Alumni Council for many years. And I remember when Rich Lyons, at that point, he was dean, and he came to the alumni and he was talking about the defining principles, and as they were going through, was confidence without attitude and, question the status quo. Um, and I remember sitting there thinking that while, we were articulating these ideas, it really was always there. It wasn't like these are new ideas to Berkeley. It was kind of what has always been part of Berkeley. And I actually think when I look even at my education, I'm thinking it has always been there. So even like I know I gave you examples from sort of my startup world, but I think even before that, as I practiced law at the bank and everything before that, it really was that way because a lot of times, you'd work with a marketing person and they might say, we want to do this. And you're looking at you look at the regs and it says something different. You're thinking, well, but why can't I do this? Is there a different way of looking at the regs? So I think that sort of gets ingrained in you and it's how you kind of approach your work.
I definitely agree. I think even through the curriculum or just through like the extracurriculars that I'm involved in through Haas, I feel like they always encourage you to have a critical thinking lens to question the status quo and really think about change making through changing the systems. And yeah, I think that it's an amazing thing to kind of be really immersed in this type of environment. And
Yeah,
then
and I also think it helps you because when you look, especially for like how many women are in business,
yeah,
and you look at um, EGAL and some of the other organizations that have started to really help develop and figure out why don't we get more women in more leadership roles at companies and things like that. Part of it is also looking at why hasn't that occurred in the past and what can I do differently and how can I help? Is it like so you mentioned that I manage or promote or the executive sponsor of our ERGs. So one of our ERGs is Women at Varro. And one of the things we're trying to help Women at Varro think through is, are there mentorship opportunities we should look at developing in the company and within the company or the outside mentors we can have? And, are we looking at, helping women kind of figure out what more do you want and how do you get there? And so it's really being involved in things that help promote this. And, and it really started from sort of being at Haas and being involved in these different groups that sort of make your whole vision and mindset be in almost everything you do. How can I help someone? How can I change something?
yes, I think that's a very big theme across a lot of the work that Haas does. And I know that recently Berkeley Women in Business held called a Women in the Workforce Conference with EGAL in partnership and kind of having these conversations, having discourse around equity in the gender equity in the workforce. And I feel that it's so important to kind of build this pipeline and really spur dialogue early on before even entering these spaces so that there can be initiatives and systems built to really inform the decision making that's happening at the top. And then on that note, how did Haas equip you to kind of build more inclusive teams and challenge traditional leadership norms and also inspire confidence in other women, especially in industries like law and finance?
Yeah. So I think Haas really made me realize how much we still need to do in order to promote women in business, for example, and help me get involved in groups that help promote this. So whether it be both at my company and at other companies, and it also helped me realize part of what's also important is to give back. And so, as I'm talking about wanting to promote women in business, at the same time, equally important to be mentors of anybody else who wants to learn more, become mentors. And so what's important is also to sort of pay it forward and help as many people as you can, and I will say I feel very fortunate in my career with the opportunities I've been provided. So for example, one of the things that I do when I hire somebody into my group is, as we have our weekly or bi-weekly checkups, one of the things I often ask them at the end, what more can I do for you? And I even ask, what is the next role you're looking for? And especially a more junior person, what's important to kind of ask them what they're looking for is to help them identify what do they want, what's important to them, where do they see their next career step, and then you figure out how can I help them achieve that. And I think part of that also comes from, sort of having the idea you're here to help someone too.
Yeah, I think that's a very important idea to bring up, the fact that it's very much a two-way street. I think some of the best systems are where it's like, or some of the best ways to evaluate how much a company invests in their more junior members is just seeing how much they're willing to provide mentorship in these special programs to make sure that they're empowered and they're thriving in their career path. So I think that's a very important value to embed. And like you said, the whole mentoring, paying it forward, I think that's something that I also even realized just early on is that it's important to be a student and also be mentoring at the same time. And you can be wearing these hats simultaneously. So very important.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things about all of the, we talked a little before about the opportunities of the different groups at Haas that people can participate in. One of the things that it teaches you both and more in undergrad, where I think, because I think when you come back for your MBA, you're sort of at a different stage in your life. But one of the best things it teaches as an undergrad is confidence. Because one of the most important things when you get out in the working world is sort of how to have confidence to advocate for yourself. And when I say advocate for yourself, I don't mean self-promote yourself where you're always saying, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, notice me kind of thing. But it's important to, how do you advocate for yourself so when you want something, what's the best way to ask for it? Or even sometimes the way you can ask for it is, this is what I want to do. How do I need to prepare myself for it? And I think that kind of confidence, I feel Berkeley teaches people by having them participate in things. So, that's kind of one of the things I would think Berkeley helped prepare me for, is sort of give me the confidence to figure out how do I ask for what I want, but in a way that I prepare myself. So it's not only just saying, I want this, it's more, how do I prepare myself to get the necessary skills or work experience that I need for that?
Yes, I definitely agree. And I think just with how interdisciplinary the Haas curriculum is, it really sets you apart with preparing you with both the soft skills and the hard skills. I think Haas does a really good job of that. And even in the electives that I'm taking at the business school, the professors really encourage you to speak up in discussion. It's very much a seminar-based type of environment. And I think it really, as someone myself who might be a little more on the more reserved side, I think the professors have really cultivated an environment where they really encourage open discussion, which I very much appreciate. I know will carry me down my career path for a while. Yeah.
And I think sometimes soft skills are the ones people sort of underestimate how important that is in life. And so it's good to have the ability to sort of develop those soft skills at the same time as you're in school and developing the necessary skills you need to actually do the work, but you need to balance it out with the soft skills too.
For sure. I think across leadership roles, I've seen soft skills become a lot more important in terms of not just like leading an organization, but cultivating others as well.
Mhm.
And I'm really glad that Haas has been prioritizing that and emphasizing it. And I've been able to see how they reconcile as well. And I guess during your time at Haas, were there any women, whether it's peers, professors, or mentors, who have influenced your career path or leadership style? And what lessons did they impart?
Yeah. So I actually had Jenny Chapman as my organizational behavior professor. And I just loved her class. I think her class for me, and I had, had kind of worked a little too, so but it made me really realize how important it is to, in managing people, form the relationships with them, but how you avoid things like groupthink. So, and she uses case studies as kind of the way we did. So we did the NASA, the capsule one. Where the engineers knew the O-ring wouldn't hold, but wouldn't speak up. And, unfortunately, we had the disaster. But the case methodology, but how she taught it and how she got the class to participate and kind of think and drew people out, I just loved. And I loved her class, and I just really admired her as a teacher. And then, being on the Haas board I had the opportunity to work, for example, with Dean Harrison. And that was also, very interesting, learning about not only, and Anne was good about kind of, you helped understand how she balanced, her work with, the school and her teaching and her research, but how important her family was to her too. And so, it's good to realize that as you have a career, you can learn, and, balance is probably the wrong word. And you will learn often in life that it's not balance. It's learning how to prioritize things at different points in your life to be able to really have a fulfilling life.
Yeah. Well, could you speak more to that? I feel like I'm very interested in just understand. I know that a big conversation in business is how can you always find that work-life balance? And like you said, I feel like it's more of like a harmony rather than balance. So how have you kind of navigated that as a working woman in the business field for so many years?
Yeah. So I will say for many, many years, people always talked about work-life balance. And I think now people are beginning to realize because unfortunately, when you say balance, you think it's like you're doing both at the same time and you're keeping it together. And why people have decided it's sort of a misnomer. It's learning to how to prioritize things at different points in your life. And so, as you can imagine, a general counsel can be quite busy at times. But what I try to do is, so when I'm in the middle of a transaction or a middle of something, and I may need to spend a little more time with work things, then I will talk to my husband about, I'm going to spend a little more time at work and I need to do this at this time period. Can you help a little more? And, so at that point, I may spend a little more time with work. But then I know when I don't have that, then I might shift and spend a little more time with my family and kids. But I've also tried to figure out how to meld the two. And so an example I will give you is we were doing an M&A transaction. We were selling the bank in the UK. And I was having to spend a fair amount of time in the UK. And it was spring break for my kids. And I was going to have to be in the UK for 3 weeks straight. And so what I said to my company is, instead of paying for a hotel, can I rent a flat? And I want to bring my family out to spend, so I'll work during the day, but I'll have my family in the evening and on the weekend. And so, I'll just charge the company the same amount as whatever, but can I do it? Now, I was very lucky. They had a better idea because they had relocated the president back to the US and they had rented a house for him and it was sitting empty. So they said, why don't you just use the house? And so that was great because my family got to come out. I would work during the day and then would spend the weekend or the nights and the weekends with my kids and my husband. So sometimes it's just figuring out how to ask and then figuring out how to balance the two. So I got my work done, but I got to spend spring break with my kids too.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. I know like a common misconception is that it's, or just something that we're all trying to battle is the having to choose between one or the other. But I think it's very beautiful how you navigate just being able to prioritize both and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward and doing the most on both sides. So I very much admire that.
Yeah.
And
And I think also sometimes it's you would if you can, like if I have work that I need to finish,
Mhm.
but it needs to be finished for the morning. So sometimes I might say, I need to leave work now. I'll go home, have dinner and, have time, and then I'll just work a little after that.
Mhm.
So it's also kind of figuring out how do you do both, but figuring out what can be done in what time frame.
Yeah, it's a lot of time management. I also think a lot of communication, whether it's with your family or within the workplace, just coordinating that.
Yeah.
It, yeah, you seem like you've been doing it seamlessly. And just another question is, having been in the industry for so long and across so many different roles and so many different sectors, I'm sure you picked up a wealth of knowledge along the way. And at Haas, like you said, we take great pride in being student always. With that in mind, what's one thing that you're still eager to learn, whether professionally or personally? It can be about anything.
Well, I think so. What's new and kind of what I'm still learning and kind of finding out how I include it in my work life is sort of generative AI. I mean, that's like the newest thing. And all companies are trying to use it, but you want to use it. You're trying to figure out what's the best way to use it and include it in the curriculum. I mean, not curriculum, include it in your work, but doing it in a way that sort of makes life easier, but you can also make sure it's accurate. And does it allow you to be more productive? And Haas has had a great AI conference that I think I've been for 2 years. And it's been interesting because, you know, very much in my legal life, I understand all the legal um, issues and things that we need to consider as part of using AI. But when I come to Haas, it's great because I can learn a little more about kind of what are the business issues and how our business is using it. And it's sort of how to meld the two together. So that's kind of the one that I'm kind of interested in knowing. And then, what's fascinating is so many more people have been telling me how they're using AI like to plan vacations. You can tell them where you're going to go and kind of help you plan an itinerary. So that's kind of the interesting thing is to learning all the different ways you can use it.
And I just love that you're keep on embedding these organic examples of like learning continuously, whether it's tied to Haas or not. And I think, yeah, AI is definitely a big discussion. I've noticed how big companies, smaller companies, there's startups being created around it, and there's new roles and divisions within
Mhm.
larger companies being formed. So definitely a big topic of discussion, and we're all trying to learn how to embed the best use cases for it. And I guess another question is, what advice would you give to candidates who are considering Haas, like many in our audience today? Are there specific programs, networking strategies, or lessons that you learned that you wish you knew earlier?
Yeah, I think, when I was in the undergrad, what I probably didn't realize more was all the networking opportunities and I also think unlike when I was an undergrad, I also think there's so many more programs that are cross discipline that you can get involved in at Haas. And so that's one of the beauties of coming to Haas, as I talked about, is the ability to get involved in so many more things. So, when you come, it's not like just, as I talked before, the traditional business degree. So I think what I would have, now, if I came back, is actually not only concentrate on the academics, which is strong, and you learn about a lot of different things, but take advantage of all of these different other opportunities, that are cross-discipline that you can participate in.
I definitely agree. I think that just being in our classrooms, even our classrooms have become a lot more diverse, and just getting being in the student organizations that I'm a part of, you learn from so many different folks from different backgrounds, identities, and learning about where their academic backgrounds come from and how they embed into like some of the projects that I've been working on. I think that's a really beautiful part about Berkeley and
Yeah,
the
and
network.
I think what's also different now that I think is you have many more of the alums who are more active back with the school. And so that's the other thing I would really encourage people to take advantage of is tapping into the alumni network. And, and it's not necessarily just for jobs, which is always good, but it would also be just having a chance to have a conversation with somebody who's either working in an area you're interested in or may have done, kind of a career path that you're interested in. So I think, that would be one thing I would really tap into if I came to Haas was tapping into the alumni too.
And I think we have such an extensive alumni network. And the great thing about Berkeley alumni, or just what I've heard, I learned from my experience, is that they're so open to supporting you and helping you navigate new journeys. And I find that to be just such a joy that I think is really unique to the atmosphere that we have here.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really interesting that people don't necessarily tap into as much is that also Berkeley alumni is global.
Yes.
And you can find Berkeley alumni in almost every part of the world and doing very diverse things. So sometimes you might have an idea you want to do and you're trying to find out, has somebody looked at this or in this particular country? And, Tenny or somebody will help put you in touch with finding a person who's doing that and who would be more than willing to talk to people.
Yeah. It's insane just knowing where all the Berkeley alumni are. I remember just even in the firm that I was interning in New York, I was nervous that because being on the East Coast there wouldn't be as many, but they just pop out of nowhere, and you get to have the most genuine conversations with folks and learning about their journeys and how they ended up there and how you do that as well. So I really love that about Haas and just Berkeley in general. And
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really interesting too is that all the alumni network in the Bay Area is very strong, and they have different alumni organizations, in pretty much all the major areas of the Bay. And so that's the other important thing is to see about tapping into that network. Again, I don't think people necessarily understand, and this is people generally, so it's not, limited to Berkeley or limited to students, is people I don't think always really value your network and how important in life it is to build your network. And, so whether you're in school or after you've graduated, is to continue to build your network. And I think tapping into the alumni network is a great way to start. And then you will just naturally find out how to continue building it. I think one of the interesting things when I look back at my career is other than probably the first two jobs I had, I pretty much have had all of my other jobs through connections.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all Haas connections, but they're all connections. And this is where you see the importance of your network. And you will find that that's not an unusual thing, that a lot of times people, after their first or second job, the way most people have achieved their next jobs is through network.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I've definitely seen that. And I would even add that I know something that we don't emphasize enough is just how strong like it is to get to know your peers. I think everyone here at
Yeah.
Berkeley is so talented, very thoughtful and very bright individuals, and getting to learn from them, honestly, from them is also such a reward and such a joy to
Yes.
have. So I'm very grateful to be in an environment like this. And a final question before we pass it on to the audience for open Q&A is, can you tell us about one of your best moments at Haas that you remember or cherish?
Ah. I was thinking about this guy because so many. So I think it's Actually, I've kind of talked about it before, but it was when they were creating the defining principles to really find out that they were not different than what the school always had. They were just a way of voicing them. And the fact that now, God, it must be 10 years, if not more, that those defining principles have been around, but they really speak of the school. And it's often when you think even companies have like a mission statement, but that is really what the defining principles are. It's sort of the mission statement for Berkeley and how important they are. But I can just imagine being in the room and they were talking about it. And so that probably has struck me as one of the best moments because it really embodies what Haas is.
I definitely agree. I do think that the defining, like they're very comprehensive in the way that they articulate what Haas values and what they very much try to instill in their students. And I think that just like being around my peers and being professors and just learning from MBA folks here, I think you can easily tell how it's organically conveyed in the work that we do or what we talk about. So very, very grateful to be in an environment like this. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you, Marina, and I'd love to open it up to the audience for any questions that you'd like to hear. Well, I'll let them trickle in if folks do have them coming up. But I know I have plenty just from all the experiences that you've been talking about, Marina. I think I wanted to learn more about the new division that was created for you to lead, the one that had to do with the the sourcing and the contracts and sourcing. So what was that like? I feel like you didn't really have a blueprint, but going into this, how did you feel about leading a new team, especially one that hadn't previously existed in a large organization? So would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I think it was kind of exciting to do something different. But I also think what was important was leaning on the person who was in the department already. And it's an interesting thing because she had been put in as the acting head of one of the groups. And then she was going to be layered over, and I was coming in to manage that group and then bring over some other teams. But sometimes it's knowing that it's okay if you don't know something, and it's better to ask. And really sort of being humble enough to let somebody who may be reporting to you teach you and be willing to learn. And surprisingly, she and I formed a really good relationship. She and I have now worked at 5 companies 20 years later. She stayed with me and we have gone on and worked at other companies. But I think sometimes it's just learning to be humble enough to learn from someone. And and then it helped me because it's like I knew some things and she helped teach me something new. And then the CEO of that bank became the CEO of Visa. And so then he asked me to come over. It was before Visa went public, and Visa was 7 different companies who all did their own thing in this area of sourcing and procurement and outsourcing strategy and everything. And he said, come and build this for me. And so then I hopped over to Visa and we took those 7 companies and put them on one global strategy.
Well, I feel like you made it sound much easier said than done. And I guess like on this, in the vein of having this like global strategy, international business, what kind of was informed going into the global projects, global work in UK and Argentina? What was that like? Were there some challenges in understanding maybe different cultures, the different environments across like different countries? What was that like?
Yeah. I think sometimes people underestimate how different people work in different countries. And so we first opened up in the UK. And I think one of the biggest surprises for us when we started opening the bank in the UK and hiring people was to find that the US culture of, working very hard, even if it means working over the weekend just to get the work done, was just the way most people worked and accepted it.
Mhm.
And when you go to other countries, especially a lot of the European countries, and it was true in the UK, people had a much more defined view of what should be their work day versus what is their private time. And it was sort of getting used to that and learning, okay, how does that work? How do we work with a workforce that has a different kind of time frame of what they consider time they'll work and time they won't work? And so that was very interesting.
Mhm.
And then when we opened, for example, the bank in Argentina, in the US, we mail credit cards to people. When you open a bank account or a credit card account, we'll mail you the credit card and that's it.
Mhm.
What was unique, for example, when we opened up in Argentina, we found out, no, that's not actually how people deliver credit cards in Argentina. People actually deliver them in person. So you
Mhm.
actually have to hire somebody who will drive to the person's house, check their ID, and then give them the card. So sometimes it's just the fascinating things learning about how different cultures work and how different things work in other countries. And that's actually for me one of the most interesting things about working globally is learning those little subtleties that you wouldn't normally think about.
Mhm. Mhm. And just like as a business student, this is very much along the lines of what I'm learning right now in my marketing class, but I'm curious, how do you know kind of where to start? I know the work that you're doing at Varo is bringing a lot of opportunities to different geographies. How do you kind of know where to start first, and where do you see the most change happening or being realized?
Yeah. So being at Varo has been fascinating because it was sort of, I'd been in banking for many years, but it was sort of taking what I knew about banking and sort of turning it on its head in the sense of, for Varo, we are an all digital bank. We have no branches. And so it's actually learning as to, and you'll find this interesting, thinking of marketing is, how do you market to people who will never come into your branch?
Yeah.
How do you market to people where you will reach them completely digitally, whether it be through, and for me also it was learning that how to advertise on Facebook, how to advertise on Google, how to advertise on all the digital channels, whether it be TikTok and some of the others. And so that's been fascinating too. And so, so sometimes it's nice to sort of start working in something that's somewhat totally in the same industry, but totally different.
Mhm.
Because then you learn like all these new things. Like I had actually never actually understood really how many apps work on the phone until we had to get a banking app on the phone. And then you learn actually how you work with the Apple Store and how you work with, with Android and all of it. And so that's actually been fascinating, learning new markets and how to bring new products to market. I'd never worked closely with engineers either. So figure out how they design products and working with Jira and Confluence and all of that was fascinating.
Wow, these are some things that I also need to probably look into myself in my own time. It
Yeah.
seems really interesting. Yeah. And
And
I
actually, a lot, that's kind of what's fun about even internships and working at different companies. You probably learn a lot about how different companies work.
yeah, I think it's just being in different, like whether it's a smaller company, I know I've been able to see how startups are running and also just larger companies. And I think that the culture and being able to honestly transition between and carry some of it over um, has been an amazing experience. I don't know if you can tell more about it as well.
Yeah. But, I do think it's interesting. And I think in a way, everybody should always work sort of during their working lifespan at different companies
Yeah.
in different, it doesn't have to be necessarily different industries, but at different scales. Because it's fascinating to work at a very big company, whether it be like an Accenture or a Visa,
Mhm.
and then coming and working at a startup, or if, flipped, it would have been just seeing how different organizations work and how decisions are made in different organizations, how reporting structures work differently, how um, quickly companies can pivot It doesn't make a difference. Do companies who are smaller able to pivot faster than larger companies? But it's kind of fascinating working and seeing all these different companies and how they work.
It really is. And I think speaking of pivots, I feel like it's not even on the individual level, but Haas really preps you to think about frame around the ways where business is evolving so fast, but you're ready and able to help these businesses pivot as well. So like a really big thing about the Haas education. So I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. How are we looking, Katie?
We are getting close to the end. It's 5:55, and I'm sure everyone's getting hungry for dinner here, though I know we could keep going. This has been a wonderful conversation, Cindy and Marina. Thank you very much for your time today. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Again, our new admits, it was great to have you and to have you see a little bit more of the conversations we're having here at Haas. We hope to see you at all of our other events, including our last Speaker series, which will be next Thursday at 5 p.m. So don't miss it. And of course, Cal Day and Cal Week and all of our other events that you can access in your Haas Admit portal. Parents, thank you for joining us. I know there might be some parents here this evening. And of course, our Haas community, current student staff. It was great to have you here this evening. So thank you. We'll see more of you next week. And it's time for dinner. So do enjoy your dinner this evening.
Thank you.
Congrats, go Bears.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.